Our guests today are model citizens. Our first speaker has served as a senior executive of the Midwest region of J.P. Morgan Chase for over 6 years. He served as chairman of President Al Gore's 2000 presidential campaign. Our first guest today served as U.S. Secretary of Commerce in the Clinton administration. He is a graduate of Loyola University Chicago and the John Marshall Law School. We all know the many contributions of the Daley family to the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois over the past 60 years. Although his style is no fanfare, no headlines, this is yet another contribution. Many of us will never know his many contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Daley. Bill?
Thank you very much, Jay, and thank you and the board members of the City Club for having us today, and thank you for what you do for the vitality and life as a great club in Chicago, the civic vitality and life of this great city and the state of Illinois. You keep us all engaged and on the edge, on cutting edge of issues that matter to our communities, so we thank you very much, Jay. And thank the club for once again having Advance Illinois here before you to present our comprehensive report card on the state of public education in Illinois. And thank each of you for joining us. Now, as someone who really feared every report card I ever got in school, I don't think you should fear that as much as I used to, but this is an important day for Advance Illinois, and we hope you believe it's an important day for the state of Illinois and for our future. I know that you're probably interested in seeing Edgar and Daley sharing a podium. I have to tell you, we really do have a great partnership as co-chairs of Advance Illinois. I suppose to many, though, it may be a bit confusing. You have a banking executive and a college professor, and if you just had that information, you'd probably never guess who's the Republican and who's the Democrat. But we did get together in 2008 as co-chairs of Advance Illinois because we both understood the urgency and need to improve our schools, and both believe that education reform is truly a bipartisan issue. You can see from our board list that that's exactly the case. We have CEOs and community activists. We have, of course, Democrats and Republicans, downstaters and Chicagoans, teachers, and also college presidents. We were founded in 2008 as an independent, objective voice to promote a public education system in Illinois that prepares all students to be ready for work, for college, and also for democratic citizenship. We're releasing this report now for two simple reasons. First, we firmly believe that with so much at stake in our schools, we must make informed decisions. It's easy to think narrowly about our educational health, limiting our analysis to the latest round of test scores. In reality, there are other factors that tell us how we are doing and indicators that can alert us to what may be coming. Second, for the first time in a very long time, the state has a comprehensive and also ambitious reform plan. Led by Chris Cook, our state superintendent, and his team, Illinois put together a very strong application for the federal grant program, Race to the Top. Importantly, they did so with active participation of very diverse stakeholders, including union leaders like Audrey Soglin and Ed Gepper, higher education leaders like Judy Irwin and Don Sevener, Jeff Oberzoot and Elaine Johnson, administrators and leaders like Mike Jacoby, legislators like Senator Lightford, Senator Meeks, Senator Staines, Senator Chapalavia, Representative Mitchell, Barbara Finn Curry, Representative Smith, and Representative Eddy. And the P20 Council, ably chaired by one of our members of Advance Illinois' board, City of Chicago Clerk Miguel DeValier, and Governor Quinn also, and especially Julie Smith of his staff. We may have missed out on the $400 million in Race to the Top funding, but we did secure over $165 million in other federal grants. And now we have a very robust roadmap to change. As importantly, some of the reforms outlined in the plan have already been put into effect. This report card reminds us how urgent the need is to strengthen our schools. It also gives us a baseline against which to measure our progress. The hard truth is that Illinois has fallen behind educationally. We trail the nation in most measures of educational success. And while the United States used to be an education leader around the world, we are no longer. For years now, the U.S. has lagged its trading partners in both reading and math achievements. In the 21st century, when jobs can and do move easily around the globe, the disturbing news is that we now lag behind other countries in overall educational levels. Where we used to have the most educated workforce in the world, we now rank 10th. And each year, other countries pass us by. Unless we change course, our educational deficits will cost us all very significantly. The real bottom line here, the state's civic, economic, and educational health are all inextricably linked. We cannot seek solutions for one without seeking solutions for the other. So at a time of great plans and great need, it is critical that we have a baseline from which to judge progress that we may be making. This report is that baseline. It outlines what it means to be ready at each transition, identifies the conditions in our schools that lead to success, and takes stock of the results which we may be getting. We created this report with a series of questions in mind. First, we need to know, are students coming to school ready to learn? Research tells us this is the first step and a most critical step, and that children who are socially, psychologically, and emotionally ready to learn at this stage have a much greater chance of graduating high school and then leading productive lives. Second, we need to understand, can students read and compute by the 3rd grade? Students who learn how to read by 3rd grade are far more likely to be academically successful and complete high school and beyond. As one local administrator put it, quote, students drop out in the 10th grade, but we lose them in the 3rd grade. Third step, are students ready for high school level work when they leave 8th grade? Do they have the requisite reading, writing, mathematical, and critical thinking skills? Have we presented them with truly challenging coursework? Are students graduating from high school with college and career-ready skills? We know that many need remedial classes in college, costing them extra money and extending their timeline to graduation if they don't get discouraged and also drop out. We also know that employers are spending way too much money training workers in basic skills they should have learned with their diplomas. Finally, are students completing some post-secondary education? At a time when good jobs increasingly require some post-secondary training, are we doing all we can to make post-secondary available, affordable, and achievable for all kids? Are students, in fact, enrolling in and completing post-secondary programs? And that's really what this report measures. On each rung of the ladder, are we doing all we can to make sure our children step up and don't fall off? We've broken the report card up into 3 sections: early education, K through 12, and post-secondary attainment. In each section, we take a look at the results we're getting, whether they're improving over time, and how we compare to top-performing states. We also look to see whether overall state averages are hiding significant achievement gaps between minority and majority students, and between low-income and affluent students. Finally, we look to see how we are doing on leading indicators. Indicators we know drive student achievement and tell us whether we are likely to get better results as we move forward. Essentially, if Illinois ranks on average in the top 10 states, we get an A. If we're 11 to 20, that's a B, and so on to an F if we're in the bottom 10 states. As you can see, this report card is different. With the help of our advisory council, we used what we feel are critical and unique measures to create a comprehensive picture of our educational system in Illinois. I'd like to thank the advisory council on behalf of the board for all their advice and guidance in the preparation of the report. Of course, the good ideas are theirs and the bad ones are ours. So what did we really find in the process of creating this report card? What grades did we earn, and what can we do, most importantly, to move forward? And for this, I'm happy to turn over the mic to our other co-chair, former Governor of Illinois, Jim Edgar. Jim?
Thank you very much, Bill. And let me echo what was said in the introduction of Bill. Bill Daley is responsible for a lot of very positive things in the Chicago area. This is just one of many that he gets no credit for, and I have found it to be quite a pleasure to work with this Daley during the last few months. We have got along well, maybe because we're both the youngest brothers in our family. But and let me also thank the City Club for allowing us to come and share our report card with you. And I have to say, this is quite a turnout. I was thinking the last time I was in this room to make a talk was 5 years ago, almost to the day. And I was very nervous during that talk because I had to decide in 10 minutes when the speech was over, I had a press conference to say whether I was going to run for governor or not. And I changed my mind several times that day on what I was going to do. Fortunately, I think I guessed right with my final decision, and it allows me to be here today in this capacity. But what we're about here today is just as important as who's going to run for governor, and in many ways more important to the long haul of this state. And while the topic is very important, and I'm glad to be here to talk about it, I wish I had a little better news to report as far as the grades. And I don't know, we got divided because I am the college professor, I get to give the grades, I guess. So here are the grades, and let me start first with the good news. And that has to do with how the state is doing in early education. Years ago, early childhood leaders and elected officials in Illinois got together to expand and enhance preschool in this state. They set clear goals to increase enrollment and improve the quality of teachers and classrooms. As a direct result of this focus and effort, Illinois now leads the nation in 3-year-old enrollment and is in the top 10 of 4-year-olds. Illinois now ties other states as a leader in terms of teacher qualifications. And though our totals are still too low, you can see that we also rank 6th in the percent of children enrolled in nationally accredited programs. It's really the good news story of this report. And if we looked at just these indicators, Illinois would get a B+. Unfortunately, there are other critical gaps in our data. First, although we know that as children get older, Illinois has some of the worst achievement gaps in the country, with poor and minority students lagging significantly behind their more affluent Caucasian peers, we have no reliable way of knowing how early these gaps begin, how bad they are, or exactly where they are. That makes it tough to identify patterns and offer solutions. Second, Latino children now comprise 27% of early education and represents the fastest growing segment of the population in Illinois. We know some Latino children are falling behind even before they start kindergarten. And we recently became the first state in the country to require bilingual preschool. Yet, we have no reliable data on how many bilingual slots are available and how many students remain unserved. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the first time Illinois takes a systemic look at whether children are where they need to be academically is in third grade. This is far too late. We have invested heavily and appropriately in giving more children a good early start. Now we need to know if children are starting school ready to learn. Because the state lacks critical outcome data, we had to give early education an incomplete. So what can we do? We are overdue to define what it means to be kindergarten ready, developmentally, socially, emotionally, and to develop a developmentally appropriate way to assess how we're doing. With the help of Ounce of Prevention, the Erickson Institution, and Advance Illinois, the State Board of Education has convened a state working group to look at this important question. When they make their recommendations, we urge agencies and the legislature to take appropriate action. And will it make a difference? Some states and some districts here in Illinois have already developed a strategy for measuring kindergarten readiness. In Decatur, Illinois, for example, we have seen it make a real difference. They're evaluating kindergarten readiness lets educators and families identify problems early and intervene. This has created a dramatic jump, essentially doubling the percentage of kids who start school kindergarten ready. We need more and better information to understand who is being served. The state recently won $22 million in federal grants to build out a longitudinal data system to collect more accurate and complete information on kids and to follow them from birth through higher education or into the workforce. As a result, we expect to have more and better information to report in years to come. Now let's move to K through 12. Looking backwards, the news isn't very good. In fact, the news is terrible. We have looked across a wide array of available indicators ranking Illinois' performance against that of other states, and Illinois gets a D. We're sorry to report this, and it reflects more the long-standing challenges we face than recent activity. In 4th and 8th grade math and reading, our kids scored in the bottom half of the nation, which is just a third demonstrating proficiency on national tests. 75% will graduate high school, placing us 19th nationally, but still means 41,000 dropouts every year. Roughly 60% of students demonstrate work readiness, which is a promising sign, but just 22% demonstrate college readiness on the ACT exam, putting us in the middle of the national pack. Now, there is a bright spot here. We are one of 5 states where all students take the ACT test, as opposed to just college-bound kids. Of those states, we posted the highest average score. We also have some of the largest achievement gaps in the country, with white and more affluent students routinely performing 3 to 4 times as well as low-income and minority students. But we look beyond just test scores. We know that learning conditions and teachers' effectiveness are leading indicators of student achievement and drive academic growth. Indeed, research shows that if a low-achieving student is paired with an effective teacher for 3 years in a row, he catches up. Other research and practice demonstrate that students make stronger academic progress when their school is safe, when they feel supported, when they are held to higher expectations, when teachers work collaboratively and are supported in turn by their principals, and when families are involved. In addition, combined with strong instruction and other factors, extending the school day has also been shown to boost learning. Finally, if we want to know whether graduation rates are likely to improve, we might take a look at the percent of freshmen who are ready to promote to sophomore status on time. Research from the Consortium of Chicago School Research indicates an overwhelming relationship between kids who are on track at the end of freshman year and those who go on and graduate 3 years later. It's an innovative and practical early warning indicator at the school level and more broadly for state levels. How does this news here look? As critical as student achievement is, we have virtually no way to measure the effectiveness of our educational workforce. We don't know if it's improving or declining, or whether there are disparities in the caliber of people working around the state. In terms of learning conditions, again, we don't have enough reliable data, and where we do have data, the news isn't particularly good. Nor do we have information outside Chicago on whether freshmen are on track or not. We do know something about the lengths of our school days. In Illinois, our kids are required to spend 5 hours a day, 176 days a year in school. That's 180 hours a year of instruction and ranks us 41st in the nation. In top performing Massachusetts, kids are getting at least 990 hours a year. If you do the math, that is over 1 additional year of schooling from K to 8th grade. In South Korea, a top-performing nation, children get over 2 years more instruction than Illinois children do. Imagine how much more a student can learn with much more time. The amount of instruction hours, however, is not a magic bullet. Obviously, what goes on while students are in a classroom is still what matters most. Still, there are numerous ways to expand the school day, and it's hard to argue we shouldn't take a closer look at whether and how to do so. It's conventional wisdom in education that test scores are lagging indicators. That is, they are the last thing to improve. When good work is in progress, as it is here in Illinois, it will still take time for that to show up. That's all the more reason for the state to get serious about measuring and discussing key leading indicators that help schools make smarter decisions and that let the public know when things are moving in the right direction. Some of these are easier to measure than others. The new longitudinal data system should help with measuring extended school days and freshman on-track rates. And there are affordable, high-quality learning conditions surveys out there that we might use to collect such information and put it to work at the school and district level. It's obviously tougher to measure teacher and principal effectiveness, but it's simply too important to ignore. And there is some encouragement movement on that front here in Illinois. Recent legislation passed strengthened the teacher and principal evaluation process to include student growth. Done well, this will give educators in the field meaningful feedback to improve their practice. It will also give us a way to talk about the state of our workforce. We didn't get in this situation overnight, and we're not going to get out of it quickly. The good news that we do have some key changes in place, and the leadership at the Illinois State Board of Education deserves a great deal of credit for its work over the past few years. We hope that means we'll start to see programs and progress on these measures in the years ahead. The third and final section of the report card focuses on post-secondary attainment. The aim here is not to assess state college system, but to focus on whether our young people are successfully completing some amount of post-secondary education. Here the state gets a C. Just 33% of our high school graduates are enrolling in college. From there, 21% are graduating from two-year institutions, with 50 to 60% graduating from four-year private and public colleges. When you shake that all out, 37% of the adult population has earned an associate degree or higher, which places us a mediocre 18th. Now, let me just say that anyone who talks to business people will tell you they need employees who have post-secondary education. A high school diploma no longer will suffice for a person to be able to enter into the middle class section of our society, particularly as we move through the 21st century. So it's critical that we get those numbers up if we're going to be a viable state. In fact, it's important to remember, as Bill already pointed out, the fact that we're 18th in the nation doesn't mean we're 18th in the world. It means we're in trouble and we need to improve. But what do leading indicators tell us that we can expect going forward? Students who need remedial courses as they start colleges are much more likely to give up before they earn a degree, and affordability has a natural and obvious impact on enrollment. Unfortunately, we do not have reliable data on how many students are taking remedial courses, what courses they need, or what's the cost to families and colleges. Getting better data on remedial education would tell us where trends are improving and identify key changes. As for affordability, Illinois, when I left the governorship, was at the top in the nation when it came to financial aid and affordability for higher education. We have now dropped to 42nd in the nation. It currently costs an average family 35% of their income to send a child to a four-year public university. If we want to expand post-secondary completion, we have to be worried about access. We need to understand what combination of tuition cost and financial aid accounts for this drop in affordability and what can be done. If we look at our ladder, it tells us a disturbing and consistent story. The data tells us that roughly a third of our kids are getting where we want them to go. For the rest, the majority, the system is not working. In a world where our civic and economic future depends on our educational health, that's simply not good enough. There is plenty of bad news in this report and in the media generally about education in our state. Understandably, this is disheartening. Huge resources have been thrown at the problem we face, and the perception seems to be we just can't solve them. That isn't true. The state recently created a strong blueprint for change as part of Illinois' Race to the Top application. And as our report shows, we have made great progress in the area of early education. These things happened because we focused, made them a priority, and then collaborated to make them a reality. As long as we continue to work together, we can bring meaningful change to education in Illinois. It might not happen as quickly as we would like, it won't happen easily, and it will require substantial investment and focus. We have some strong leadership in key agencies and positions, growing collaboration, and a promising plan, so we must remain fundamentally hopeful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your remarks, Governor Edgar and Secretary Daley. If people have questions, if you would just hold them up, our staff will circulate around and pick them up. And we'll begin asking questions because I've already received several. The first is from City Club member and Mr. Education in Illinois, retired State Senator Art Berman. Art, where are you? Over here. Very simple question, and I don't know who wants to handle this first. When will we see school funding reform?
Well, first of all, you have to define reform. What Senator Berman thinks is reform and what a downstater might think is reform are two different things. Though I will say that my time in Springfield working with Art Berman was, he was someone who had a statewide perspective, and I appreciated that as someone who also tried to have a statewide perspective, even though we came from different parts of the state. I don't know, Art, to be truthful, if we will ever have a satisfied program for everyone in this state on school funding. One of the things that we attempted to do in the 90s was put in the minimal foundation level to began to try to assure that at least there was a minimal amount of money available that we thought was necessary for a quality education for all schools. We never in Illinois, I think, will have the same amount of money spent on all schools as long as we have local public school districts. I don't think you can force those districts that want to spend more and are able to spend more to come down to a level where the state can afford to bring up the lower districts. So I think there always will be some difference in the amount. What I think we have to assure, and what we've tried to assure, and sometimes more successful than other time, is that there is a minimal amount available that is necessary to provide what is viewed as a quality education. That doesn't mean everybody's going to get the Cadillac, but it means that they should have an education that will allow them to move on to higher education. One of the frustrations we found in the 90s that we had many schools in the state that couldn't afford to offer the courses that were required just to get into the University of Illinois. And that was one of the reasons we put in the minimal foundation level, which was to bring them up to what we thought was a level necessary to provide the basic needs of education. That's something that needs to continue to be looked at. It needs to be continued to be raised as costs go up. But again, I don't think we'll ever reach the point in Illinois where we have the same amount of money for all school districts unless we just have one school district in the state.
Thank you, Governor Edgar. This question is from Ziomara Metcalf. By increasing the number of charter schools, do you believe education is compromised in terms of accessibility, standardized curriculum, etc.?
I think the board would feel that the increase in number of charter schools has been a good thing for the state. I think the interest in communities, first in parents, in getting their kids into charter schools, the community's engagement with the schools, the business and philanthropic leaders, the foundations who have supported charter schools, show an interest. You know, the great thing, look at this turnout, the great thing about education today, and the reason I think some of us are very hopeful, is we get it. And I think the more people who want to get into this debate, into the discussion, be part of charter schools or public schools, private schools, is going to help the state. So I think the fight with charter versus public, we should get beyond that, and people who want to support charter schools and the increase in number, we think is a good thing for the state and part of a reform and an improvement. Let me just say, maybe if you had made a different decision 5 years ago when you left this room, we'd have a better situation in the education system.
Whoa. This is the City Club. You know, we're open for all sorts of questions and opinions and answers. Maybe something not quite as complicated. This is from City Club member Leighton Olson. What's the future of digital textbooks and digital video in K through 12 in Illinois?
Well, I think there's no doubt digital textbooks or technology is fundamentally going to change the way people learn. I mean, you can look at the secondary education system of America, how it's changed dramatically. People are online, people who work out of their homes, or family members who may be in homes that want to continue education but can't afford or can't travel. No question about it, technology is going to change all this. We at JP Morgan Chase Foundation support a number of technology ways to help young kids starting in kindergarten to learn better using the technologies of today. So, you know, there's no question that we can be more efficient, more effective, just like you and your businesses are more effective, more efficient using technologies. The public education system and editorial comment, government in general, ought to try to look at the private sector and take advantage of the technology boom and the enormous opportunities that technology brings. So I think you could have over the next 10 years, fundamental shift in the way people learn. Kids, all my grandkids, our kids, they're learning differently. They live differently. They live with technology. They're most comfortable with it. We have to get used to it. And the people who administer the schools and the education systems have to get with it because that's where the kids are.
Well, let me just echo that. I think, again, my grandkids know much more about technology than their grandfather does. In fact, Dakota, my grandson, is in charge of trying to program my telephone and to help me out with my iPod. And I think it's a great way to get to young people. They respond to technology, and I think it is very important that people in leadership understand that, and we shift our delivery of information or our learning process to take advantage, because kids like the technology much more than they probably like a teacher lecturing or a textbook. So again, it's really a great opportunity, I think, to help us in our attempts to improve education opportunity in this state.
Thank you, Secretary and Mr. Governor. And probably if we asked everyone else in this room, how many of the rest of us have our grandchildren program our cell phones, a lot of hands would go up. This is from, this person would never pass my handwriting test. Okay, I'll try. Dr. Conrad Spirison with LaSalle Bureau, Putnam County, NCR, BC. Okay, the question is, what high-quality learning condition surveys are out there?
You know, probably Robin Staines, our executive director, probably have a better sense nationally as to what's out there. I don't know if you want to jump up, Robin, and answer it, or I don't know, to be very frank with you, the answer to the question.
Oh, the one thing that we had at a board meeting, I made reference to the people who track, they're from the University of Chicago, who track readiness of freshmen for sophomore year. They track a lot of things. There's a very interesting presentation they made talking about the impact of not only freshmen and how well you can predict they'll do, but also other things that they have tracked, and the importance of the atmosphere a student learns in, the cooperation among teachers, working with the principal. I mean, right here in Illinois, we have groups that I think have been very successful in being able to track some of these. What we have to do as a state is plug into those surveys and to make sure there's some continuity around the state so we can measure. As you could tell by my remarks, there's a lot of blank spaces when we try to look at education, because we have not done a good as job as we should have as trying to track progress. I mean, for the amount of money we spend on education, I think those of us in leadership positions have been a little derelict, that we have not required better accountability reports as we appropriate this money. And that is, again, one of the thrusts. What we're trying to suggest is, and already the state has begun to take some steps in the last few years, and hopefully we'll continue to take additional steps. But I think those are here in Illinois. We can identify those. We just got to make sure it's done.
Okay, and I'll try to lump a few questions together. Here's one from Anonymous. This is probably the same person. If you go to Millennium Park at the Wrigley Peristyle, the names of everyone who's contributed $1 million is listed, and the very first name on the list is Anonymous. We all thought it was Paul Green and Ed Mazer, but it must be this person. Question: what is Illinois' grade on the state's share of funding for public education?
Well, we didn't give a grade to the state for their funding. Look at, we spend, the taxpayers of Illinois spend a lot of money on education. And no doubt funding is important, but how you spend the money, and these are difficult times, so the expectation that there's a pot of gold that the state's going to come up with is just unrealistic. But we do spend a lot of money, and on average, we spend a lot of money per student statewide compared to the national average. So it is not alone funding. But we did not give a grade to the state, no question about it. They've got to be more efficient, effective with the use of the money and resources in different parts of the state, targeted better, getting results better. What we're trying to say with this report card, as Jim mentioned, and if you take the report, please, on behalf of the board members who are here, we really do want you to go through this, because we're going to do this on a periodic basis. This is not just once. So we do believe that funding is an issue, but it is not the primary issue for improving these grades as you see before us.
Let me just comment too, as someone who's been at the state level, there's no doubt the state percentage is low compared to other states, but the total amount of money we spend per student in Illinois is higher than most states, because historically, right or wrong, we have relied on local property taxes. And I thought maybe that wasn't correct. I took a run at that. Now, we ended up putting a lot more money into education. We didn't necessarily shift from property tax to income tax, though we put the same amount of money we went into. But there was a lot of resistance to that, because a lot of folks know if the state, let's say, fully funds schools, you're not going to have local school districts. It's going to be run from Springfield. I mean, that's one of the arguments against it. I think the state should do more, but that is not going to solve the problems we've outlined here today. The problems are we've got to make sure even the money we have today, which compared to other states is significant, we need to make sure we're using that money in a more effective way. And too often this debate and this discussion revolves around just on how much money and how much more money. And that all, if we doubled how much we spent on education in Illinois, that would not solve the challenge that we face in education.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of questions here regarding the teachers' unions and administrators. Are they impediments to achievement, or can they be part of the reform picture?
They have to be part of the reform picture. You know, no question there are certain people in administrative positions, political system, unions, that are impediments, and there are a tremendous number that are the only means by which there's going to be true reform. So again, as Jim said, you know, you get this debate constantly between how much money, or is it not, and then some people want to run to it's the union's fault, it's not. Look, it's not about the unions, this is about the kids. The teachers, who are union members obviously, in all circumstances, at least in the public system, are the integral part of this. They must be held to a different standard than we have historically held them. They must be given the resources to do their job, but that's why we have encouraged very strongly, and we're on the road to a teacher evaluation. We think that's a vital part of the future of improving education in Illinois. The employees must be part, the teachers must be part of coming up with a fair evaluation system. But all of us in business evaluate our employees. You have to, and so we've got to work and move quickly. We are hopeful that we will come to that, to a statewide evaluation system for teachers, but that's vital. But it is not the unions. Yes, you can blame the unions. Yes, you can blame the administrators, the politicians, the parents, the kids. That gets us nowhere, and nowhere in this debate. We spent too much time doing that. They must be held as employees of the school districts where the taxpayers pay for their salaries. There is an expectation, and they must understand it is a fair expectation of them to expect better as employees of the people of their school districts.
Thank you, Secretary Daley. Governor Edgar, questions from Sandra Guthman with the Polk Brothers Foundation and our board member, Anne-Marie St. Germain. What are the next 3 things we should do in Illinois to raise the grades? And what distinguishes Advance Illinois solutions from efforts over the last 2 decades?
Well, first, I don't think Advance Illinois, we have all the answers. I mean, a lot of the answers we propose have been around for a while, or they've been used in other states, and there's other people promoting them. I think what we felt like, we come at it a little different perspective. We're not a teachers group, we're not an administrator group, we're not just a business group. We have make up our membership of people from all different backgrounds, both political parties and, you know, right to left, as Bill said earlier. So, you know, we have taken a look at a lot of people's suggestions and tried to figure out what do we think are the top priorities for Illinois. So again, I don't want to suggest that we have all the magic answers. Any suggestions we have, probably we borrowed them from somebody else. I think the first part of that question is, what are the first 3 things we need to do?
Yeah, what would be the next?
Well, again, I think go back to some of the things that have now been put in place recently in Illinois. A lot of it just in the last few months because of our attempt to win the federal dollars. I'm not a great one on federal dollars, but I think that exercise, while we didn't get the top amount, we did improve how we did things in Illinois trying to get it. And that's still in place. And while we didn't get the money from the federal government, we did, I think, bring about some significant changes. And the $22 million we got for the longitudinal data system might be the best $22 million we ever got from the federal government for education, because that will begin to allow us to really, in a much more effective way, to measure how effective our educational system is and to try to determine where we have problems. So that one thing alone, I think, will help us improve in Illinois. Second is, if we get the data and we see we got a problem, and we got to make changes. Not just in education, I think in all parts of life. It's hard to change, particularly if you're the author of the current plan or if you're in place. And I think what this study shows is we need to bring about some change. And with this new data that we expect to be receiving, I think are going to be in a better position to bring about change, and we just need to make sure we have what it takes to do that change.
Thank you. Okay, I have 2 questions here. One is from Alderman Willie Cochran of the 20th Ward, City of Chicago, and the other is from David Sinsky, who's with After School Matters. And both deal with cognitive and emotional issues that affect learning capabilities of children across all socioeconomic levels. The need to invest in more schools that address this is important. For example, After School Matters offers a robust learning environment and also addresses emotional needs of young people. Are after-school opportunities included in your description of extending the school day as a strategy to improve outcomes?
We didn't prescribe what the longer school day, obviously, in encouraging longer school days should be made up of. I'm obviously a big believer in the program of After School Matters that my sister-in-law has driven, because it's a way to, it was originally started as kind of a way to fill those vital hours when kids get out of school and parents come home from work, to engage, keep them engaged, because it's such a difficult period for a lot of young people, especially in those challenged communities. When you look at the increasing crime in those hours, the whole thing. So I think it's got to be part of a longer school day, if obviously a broader set of activities for kids to learn. The question by the alderperson on emotionally challenged kids, when we talk about focusing on the early, those kids being ready as they come into kindergarten and emotionally, we make sure that they're emotionally able to handle what they handle. It is a big problem, especially as you get into very challenged communities. And somehow we've got to focus even pre-kindergarten, obviously, with resources. And for those kids who are at high risk, it is vital, because a lot of them, as the alderperson knows, come in and they're behind a big 8 ball, even at an age of 3 years of age.
Thank you. Governor, this might be a question right up your alley right there. It's a question about the lottery. What happened to those funds? How come they were diverted from education?
If you see me smile, every legislator in the room is smiling right now. That is the most asked question. What happened to the lottery money for education? I'm now going to play historian because I've been around long enough. I was there when the lottery passed. The lottery passed in 1973 because of, because of your father. Mm-hmm. And it passed. I was trying to make sure that it was still, and his father, who convinced some Senate Democrats who had always opposed the lottery when it was for education. And the reason it passed was to help fund the RTA. It was to offset the sales tax money that was going to go to the RTA. So this myth that has been built up that the lottery was passed for education. They tried it for years. They never could pass it. And it finally passed in the fall of 1973 as part of the compromise to create the RTA. And the reason was it passed was Bill's father had a friendly discussion with some rather reluctant Democratic senators, and I think I used to remember who they were, and they saw the light. And they voted for that. Then after that, every legislator used to always get asked what happened to the lottery. Well, finally legislators got tired of being asked, and they changed the law that said the lottery money goes straight into the education fund. Now that just meant in lieu of the general revenue fund, they had to take a little of that to pay for the RTA. But even if the lottery was solely for education, and I'm not sure what it is, when I left office, and I don't think it's gone up a whole lot, it made the state about $500 million. Now that's a lot of money, but we spend, how many, 10 billion?
22 billion.
22 billion state money, general revenue. So again, even if the lottery had gone solely to education, it's really a drop in the bucket to what the education needs are in the state of Illinois and what we're paying. So while that question gets asked and everybody's always looking for that kind of easy way, the sin tax to pay for government, it just doesn't raise enough money even if that had just solely gone to education. Now, no way am I suggesting we repeal the lottery because they don't have $500 million to lose down there right now, and we never do. But that never was going to solve the financial problems of schools. It's going to have to come from the major general revenue sources, the income tax, the sales tax. Sin taxes, while they help a little bit, they're not the silver bullet a lot of people think they are.
Just proves Jim's kept his memory pretty strong.
Yeah, and now that, Pam Brown, now that you see the light, go out there and dispel any of those myths that people still are talking about. We have time for 2 or 3 last questions. One is from board member Martha Jantho. We hear about graduation rates. Is anyone looking at the relationship between graduation rates and achievement grade levels?
I'm sure. I mean, I don't. If their question is to ask for an organization that's looking at it, it may be something that we in our next go round will focus on. But I'm sure there are organizations looking at it. We haven't, but I'm sure there are some who are doing that.
Okay. Well, and I'm not sure if this is what that question intended, but I think, what was it, 71% of our students are graduating from high school. I think there is probably a need to, is that 71% that graduating from high school really have a high school equivalent education skills? I mean, that's something I think that we need to continue to look at, and hopefully again by some of these things we've put in place in the last few months in Illinois, we'll have a better job of measuring just how well prepared are these high school graduates. The fact that only 37% of them go on and get an associate degree or higher kind of leads me to believe maybe just because you have a high school diploma doesn't mean you've received what you need to receive from graduating from high school, and we need to continue to work on that.
And I think we rank 50th out of 50 states on college-ready curriculum for our high school students, which in and of itself is a statement of a negative statement, obviously.
Okay, and a question here. Are there any key reforms that we can take away from our foreign competitors that you're aware of?
Well, length of school day, I mean, that's, I think, one that a lot of people feel we need to do in this state, and the indication not only in other nations but in some other states, it works. Now, the one thing, I was busy revising my remarks. Initially, in my remarks, we had Texas as an example of where they actually go 2 years more from kindergarten through 8th grade. But Texas scores are not as good as Illinois scores, I don't believe. So just because you lengthen the school day doesn't guarantee that it's going to improve education. What you do with that time is still the critical thing. And so I think, that, again, that's something we've learned, and we can learn from other countries and other states. Not only you lengthen it, but what type of quality of educational opportunity do you give the students, and how can that be transferred here to Illinois?
Let me just mention one other thing in addition to the length of school day. As those of you who travel around the world and where you see educational systems that are really producing very different and much more positive results than we have in this country, you see a tremendous importance put by the families on their kids, on education. You go to Asia, where we've seen tremendous improvement there and the successes in Asia. That is the most important thing for the family. And I think we have to re-engage that with all of the families of young kids, that they have to, it's not the government's responsibility, it's not the teachers' union responsibility, it's not the mayor or the governor's responsibility. You as a parent have the responsibility, and the parents and the family structure has to make sure that that is most important, and the kids understand it. And the parents are not pushing it and pushing it off on somebody else. That is a main difference that I've seen as I've traveled around the world and see where education systems and the family believes that's the most important thing they can give their children. And we've got to get that in our country. It was that for many years, and I think that's a big piece of the breakdown here, is that it is somebody else's problem. The responsibility of educating our kids start with the parents. And until that gets back as the primary group responsible, not the teachers, not the politicians, not the school building, but the parent, this will be a very difficult thing to change.
Okay, and of course we realize the Chicago scores are better than the Texas scores. It was Bears 27, Dallas 20. Very last question, Jennifer Steens. There's a lot of Steens here, okay. Would either of you be willing to share with us which of the candidates for governor you think would make a better choice from an educational perspective?
No.
Let me just say, whoever wins that election, they have my sympathy. Because the challenge is facing the next governor, not just in education, but I think, as this report indicates, education has to be a priority, and I'm sure both candidates will tell you it is a priority. They might have different approaches, but education is just one of many challenges that the next governor is going to have to face. And I think everyone in this room, I'm going to play college professor and give you my civic lesson here. Everyone in this room needs to be involved in that process. On election day, whoever you're for, you need to vote, but also I think you need to be ready for some really tough decisions. And many people in this room, with your expertise, hopefully, will be involved in trying to find solutions to those problems. There's no doubt education will be one of the top ones. And again, I think if you listen to both candidates, they'll say that education is a priority, and I think it is. I think they're both very sincere people. They just have different points of view, and may the best man win.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Jim said. I would say, as I mentioned in my remarks, there has been tremendous progress made already this year on reform, whether it was for the race to the top or the other, and I think Governor Quinn has been at the forefront of that and those successes in the legislature this year, and I'm sure whoever wins, as Jim said. And again, for those of us who are in business, the economic vitality in the future of this state is totally dependent on whether or not we get it right in education, not only to compete against Michigan or Wisconsin, but as more importantly, to compete against the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.